when the U.S. Army used the ocean to defeat a Nazi fortress, October 1944. October 1944. The Dutch coastline was silent in a way that felt dangerous. Cold wind rolled in from the North Sea, carrying salt, mist, and the distant echo of artillery. Dark clouds pressed low over the flat land. Rain fell steadily, turning the battlefield into endless mud. Captain Ethan Walker of the United States Army stood inside a shallow trench, his boots half submerged in water. 200 yards ahead, a massive German fortress rose in the seawall like a concrete monster. Behind Walker, wooden crosses marked fresh graves. 30 American soldiers had already died trying to take that single structure. 30 families back in the United States would soon receive letters they never wanted to read. The bunker had been built in 1942 as part of Hitler's Atlantic Wall. Its reinforced concrete walls were over 12 feet thick. Narrow firing slits allowed German machine guns to cover every approach. Inside, Major Heinrich Adler commanded nearly 170 Wehrmacht troops. They had food for weeks. They had ammunition stacked to the ceiling. They had artillery capable of destroying ships miles offshore. And 3 days earlier, Adler had sent a message to American command. "We will fight until the last bullet. Do not waste your men." That fortress controlled the Scheldt waterway. 30 miles away sat the port of Antwerp, one of the most important supply hubs in Europe. Whoever controlled that route controlled the war's logistics. Fuel, food, medical supplies, tank parts, ammunition. Nothing could reach Allied armies while Adler held that position. The U.S. command had already tried everything. Naval guns fired hundreds of shells. The explosions filled the air with smoke and fire. But when the dust settled, the bunker still stood untouched. Heavy bombers were considered, but Dutch civilian houses were too close. So the Americans sent infantry. The first assault cost 21 lives in under 2 minutes. The second assault failed inside smoke and machine gun fire. The third assault added more graves. Now winter storms were approaching. In less than 48 hours, rough seas would shut down naval operations completely. If the fortress wasn't taken soon, Allied supply lines would freeze until spring. Inside a makeshift command post, generals argued about artillery and troop movements. Captain Walker said nothing. Instead, he studied something no one else cared about: tide charts. Before the war, Walker had been a commercial fisherman in Maine. 15 years on the Atlantic had taught him lessons no military academy ever could. He understood currents. He understood tides. He understood that the ocean was never an obstacle, only a tool. The Scheldt estuary had extreme tidal movement. At high tide, water rose more than 20 feet. At low tide, it dropped just as far. Nearly 45 feet of change every day. Walker examined captured German blueprints. The fortress sat directly on top of the seawall. Its foundation rested almost exactly at mean sea level. Drainage pumps were marked inside, designed for rain and minor flooding, not for the ocean. Walker traced a path on the map with his finger. If the seawall were breached at the right moment, the North Sea itself would end the battle. That night, Walker quietly told his engineering team, "We're not going to attack the fortress," he said. "We're going to drown it." They gathered in a supply tent under dim lantern light. Walker explained his idea. A section of seawall west of the fortress had already been weakened by naval shelling. If they placed explosives there at low tide, the wall would rupture. 6 hours later, when high tide arrived, millions of gallons of seawater would surge inward. The bunker's lower levels would flood. Ammunition would be destroyed. Communications would fail. The Germans would be forced to choose between surrender or drowning. "How much explosive?" one sergeant asked. Walker had already done the math. Nearly 400 pounds. That night, they quietly collected charges from multiple engineering units. No one asked questions. Engineers understand sacrifice. Next came waterproofing. Every bundle was sealed in rubber canvas. Every detonator was triple-checked. Walker built redundant timing systems in case one failed. For transport, Dutch resistance fighters provided a small fishing boat with a silent engine. Walker took the wheel himself. At 3:15 a.m., under heavy clouds, the boat glided across black water. Low tide would arrive at exactly 3:47. They had 20 minutes. The engineers climbed onto slippery rocks beneath the seawall. Barnacles cut their hands. Cold water soaked their clothes. Working in silence, they pressed explosive charges deep into fractured concrete. Walker wired the detonators with fingers numb from freezing spray. Every connection mattered. At 3:45, they retreated. At 3:47, the seawall erupted. The blast sounded like the earth tearing open. Concrete flew skyward. Then the ocean moved. Water surged through the breach like a living avalanche. 50,000 gallons per minute poured inland. By sunrise, shallow water surrounded the fortress. By mid-morning, it reached the lower floors. Inside, German soldiers fought rising seawater with pumps and sandbags. They never had a chance. The flow overwhelmed everything. Ammunition rooms flooded. Radios shorted out. Power failed. By high tide, water filled corridors chest deep. At 10:30 a.m., American observers saw movement on the roof. German soldiers climbed out onto wet concrete. Minutes later, a white sheet appeared. Surrender. 170 enemy troops walked out through seawater with their hands raised. Major Adler emerged last. He handed over his pistol and quietly said in English, "You did not defeat us with weapons. You defeated us with the sea." Not a single American died in the operation. Military analysts later estimated a frontal assault would have cost over 200 casualties. Instead, the U.S. Army had used nature itself. Within 72 hours, Allied supply ships reached Antwerp. 4,000 tons of supplies per day began flowing to the front. That breakthrough accelerated the collapse of German defenses across Western Europe. Walker's method spread quickly. Flooding tactics were adopted by Allied engineers across France and Belgium. After the war, Captain Ethan Walker returned home to Maine. He never spoke much about what he'd done. He went back to the ocean. Years later, when asked how he thought of the idea, he answered simply, "I didn't think like a soldier. I thought like a fisherman. You don't fight the sea. You work with it." And that is the lesson this battle left behind. Sometimes victory doesn't come from bigger guns. Sometimes it comes from asking a different question, not how to destroy the enemy, but how to let nature do the work.